We are happy to have Bobby Gaudreau, Vice President of Sales and Marketing at Activator Dealer Solutions, joining us today. Bobby has over 20 years of professional experience, primarily in sales and marketing software with a focus on the automotive space. At Activator, Bobby drives the go-to market strategy, sales execution, business development, and revenue growth for Activator to support the growing market demand for improved data quality, marketing automation, execution, and services. With that being said, Bobby, let's get this presentation started. The floor is yours.
Great. Thanks, Susan. It's great to be here again. As mentioned, my session today is all about unlocking the value of data. And under that umbrella, I'm looking forward to talking about some thematic areas that at Activator we've been working on now for a bit. So there's really three themes that I'm going to cover over the next 30 minutes. So number one is overall vendors just like us at Activator and dealers all need to do a better job and have kind of a better path to fix the data challenges that have really plagued our industry for years. Number two is that fulfillment and execution are paramount. It has to be more than just email blasts or a one-size-fits-all mentality when it comes to marketing execution. And there needs to be a healthy mix of art and science, a healthy mix of strategy and modern day tactics. And then number three is life would sure be a lot easier if everybody had bi-directional open APIs. That's not what exists today. That's coming, but it's probably at least a couple years away. So we can't just sit around and wait for it. That said, though, even if everybody was aligned and everybody was playing nice, many of the marketing systems out there are not capable today of doing a lot with enhanced first and third party data. This is something, and I'm going to talk more about this in some future slides, but this is something that we've experienced and learned from at Dominion Dealer Solutions, and then in particular at Activator Dealer Solutions. And it's why we pivoted our own direction a couple of years ago to invest in rebuilding our own technology in Salesforce.com. So where we didn't necessarily outsource our ideas, we just outsourced where we're building it. And that's what I'm excited to share, kind of what we've seen and what we've learned through that process. And it's really there's been 5 benefits that we've been able to experience on behalf of our dealers. So it's all been around increased efficiency and productivity. It's all around really that experience and the scalability and speed. Number 3 is just having access to the latest tools and technology has been a game changer when it comes to proactively fixing data problems. And then it allows us and our dealer customers to really focus on the core activities. And then ultimately, there's just some cost efficiencies and the ability to be cost effective. So over the next 13 slides or so, I've organized the next 13 slides really across 4 topics. So we're going to talk a little bit or a lot about the complexity of data, but really define the root cause problems and how to fix those permanently. And then really quantify what problems have been created from the bad data seeping its way into databases and finding their way into various marketing campaigns and reporting. And then number 3 is walk through what are the consequences by doing nothing or the consequences of ignoring it. And then what are the benefits of doing something proactive? And then finally, we'll kind of wrap up with defining what is a customer data platform. How does that kind of work its way into this whole system? And then I'll share just some emerging trends that are happening inside and outside of automotive, and then we'll wrap it up from there. So just by way of an introduction, right? So again, as Susan mentioned, my name's Bobby Gaudreau. This is, I think, probably the 4th or 5th time I've had an opportunity to do one of these webinars, which we really like. We get some great audiences, and it's a great forum to talk about this. I was hired a little over 6 years ago to help run sales and eventually marketing for an automotive business within Activator or within Dominion's automotive division. And for the past few years, I've been helping to spearhead kind of a new strategic direction of Activator Dealer Solutions and our partnership with Salesforce.com. So for me personally, I started in this industry working at a Volvo dealership in 1999 as a salesperson. And then a couple months later, I became the first internet sales manager when we launched the first website with Cobalt. A few years after that, I left automotive for a bit and I started at the ground floor again as a business development rep, working for a .com company, calling into OEMs as well as other Fortune 500 companies. And that was the job that kind of motivated me to get into outside sales. And for the past 20 years or so, I've been selling enterprise level business to business software. With a few breaks, I've spent the majority of my career working with dealers and working with OEMs. Throughout my career, I've been lucky, I've been fortunate to have worked for some transformative companies at some pretty cool times. So I worked for Autobase really at the dawn of CRM in the automotive space in the mid 2000s. I helped to start up the mid-market division for a company called LivePerson, which was the first company to really offer customer engagement in what we know now as chat online, and that was in and outside of automotive. I worked for a company called IMN that was really one of the first companies in retail automotive to introduce true content marketing and to understand customer behaviors within the content. And I worked at DealerRater, which is really the first company to start online consumer reviews and ratings. And I mention all of this not to brag or to kind of give you my resume, but as exciting as those companies were, and as exciting as it was to work for those companies at that time, and as impactful they were, in most of these cases, all of these things, CRM, chat, content marketing, these are all table stakes at dealerships. They're costs of doing business. But I think where this industry is headed with better data management and more thoughtful marketing by leveraging a customer data platform to enhance other investments that have already been made, the possibilities are as exciting as anything that I've seen. And it's far greater than anything I've experienced in my 15 plus years. So I mention that only because we're at the doorstep of something really exciting and really transformative. And I would just close on this, and we'll kind of dig into this, is none of us can control the economy, and we certainly can't control the market. But I think when done right, the value that a properly installed and utilized CDP and a properly installed and leveraged marketing system is something that can transform our industry in ways just like websites did, just like CRM did, just like digital retail is doing. These things have not always been comfortable, but I think most people would agree that they have fostered growth and positive change for consumers as well as the dealerships that have implemented or executed on them. So that said, let's kind of jump right into this, and I'm going to start by defining what are we trying to solve for? And it's really this conundrum, the complexity of trapped data. So I mentioned before, my very first job that I had was I was a salesman at the number 3 Volvo dealership in the country, Boston Volvo Village, in 1999. And when I worked there, then internet leads came over through the fax machine. I had a little desk that was hooked up to a dial-up next to the photocopy machine where people would make photocopies to go on test drives, and the key machine to get the keys and license plates to go on test drives. You know, our competitive analysis really consisted of on the Saturday morning meetings, looking at the Boston Globe and the Boston Herald and looking at what the 8 other Volvo dealers in the market were running for ads that weekend, right? So I think, 20 odd plus years later, right, I think we can agree that things have evolved. But when we think about silos and trapped data, I think it's a good place to start with kind of the OGs on that, which is really where did it start, which is the DMS and the CRM companies. And it's easy, not necessarily wrong, to blame them, but it's not necessarily fair, because there's certainly questionable strategies and questionable integration fees. But the reality is, outside of automotive, data silos exist everywhere. Data challenges exist everywhere. They just happen to be really bad in the industry that we're in. I'm going to talk more about why that is and what we can do to fix it. But I'm going to focus throughout my presentation on the DMS and CRM because they are the primary source for most customer and prospect data. And therefore this is where most people, whether a dealership is doing internal marketing or they're using an outside vendor like us or an ad agency, most of the marketing lists that are generated are going to come out of the DMS or the CRM. And now, really, a DMS and a CRM are databases that are designed to do specific things, and frankly, they do those specific things well. So, at the risk of being elementary or parochial, a DMS is for day-to-day operations of the dealership, right? It's around managing inventory, managing sales, managing accounting, general ledgers. CRM systems are designed for lead management, and they're really good prospect follow-up tools. Both DMS and CRMs house contact information, some historical information, and a little bit of demographic information. But what they don't do and what they aren't is they are not marketing systems, and they are not designed to make list generation and segmentation easy. It's not negative, that's just a fact. But why? Is the challenge with a CRM and a DMS is they're not built or equipped to share, understand, or react in real time to information, right? So that's worth repeating, right? And this is whether your CRM is any automotive specific CRM or you work outside of automotive and you've got a CRM that's a household name account or an ERP system. They're simply just not equipped to share and understand, or probably most specifically react in real time to customer information or customer behavior. So they're not designed to contain records that include interactions and behaviors that can then be turned around and shared with a marketing system. That's where the CDP comes into play. So I'm going to pause on that right now, but I'm introducing that concept now. That's the role that a CDP plays. So the net is, though, without solutions in here, it's very difficult to have real-time, genuine communications that are able to execute on personalized messaging based on what the system knows or what a particular customer does with a piece of content or within a certain marketing channel like email or SMS or digital. The other fact is, and I'm gonna really drill into this on my next slide, is that vendors like Activator, like any vendor that's marketing on behalf of the dealership, we don't control the data, right? And so this makes life, we have access to the data, but we don't own it. We don't control it. So that makes life particularly difficult and very unpredictable, right? So for example, right? So as a business and the product that we offer, right, we have doubled down on our investment in rebuilding our platform using Salesforce.com. So we use Marketing Cloud to execute marketing. We use Sales Cloud to build our CDP. We're using CRM Analytics, which is a combination of Tableau reporting and analytics and Einstein AI to basically manage all of the reporting and eventually the portal where dealers would log in to access information. Internally, we use HubSpot for our own CRM, for our own marketing, and for our own customer service records, or for our own customer service activities. So when we do our own marketing, so we probably promoted some marketing for this session you're on right now, we don't go to HubSpot and ask them to maintain our list for us. We're responsible for it. We don't rely on HubSpot to cleanse and purify and manage all the duplicates because we have them in our database too. We're responsible for it. it's just much different expectations that have been fostered in the dealer world, where customers such as ours typically is providing both the technology and the services to maintain that list. So let's talk kind of more about the challenges with that. So when we think about the types of inaccurate data, and this could be its own session itself, but I'm going to kind of just really zero in on what we've learned and what we're focusing on right now. So building on the fact that vendors don't control the data, they have all, and collectively kind of managed to jack things up for an individual dealer over the years. Brian Pash, a industry consultant, had a recent blog where he did a really good job where he laid out these data challenges, and he didn't pull any punches, and he essentially called on the vendors to do more to fix or prevent what he's referring to as like pretty core data hygiene issues. So just if I take a step back and a little bit more context, so I'm proud of the history that Dominion Dealer Solutions and the various companies that have been in the portfolio have had in terms of blazing a trail across many segments that are now commonplace in our industry, whether it's websites, CRM, equity mining, service retention marketing. So I mentioned that because we know a thing or two when it comes to outbound marketing. We know a thing or two when it comes to segmentation. We know a thing or two when it comes to looking at and diving into databases. We cut our teeth in equity mining and retention marketing and review management, and so we understand the intricacies of audience building in this segment. And depending on where your comfort level or interest level or knowledge level is on this concept of a customer data platform, it's probably safe to say that everyone is aware that you just don't go to Best Buy and buy it and install it and it just works in 5 seconds, right? There's a lot of work that goes into it, and there's a lot of trial and error to get it dialed in and to get it right. And so for us, we started on getting a handle first on the DMS data, because we are already doing a lot of stuff there. And we believe that's the primary place where a lot of outbound marketing happens. And there was a lot of learnings and a lot of quick wins and a lot of turnkey stuff that we can do on behalf of our dealers. So we've organized things into 3 buckets on what the challenges are that we help to attack. So the first one is duplicate records that has a first cousin, which is called household records. The second is malformed records. And then the third is invalid email addresses or spam trap addresses. So I'm going to kind of break each one of these down. And there's overlap, and they're certainly not mutually exclusive. So duplicate records are a fact of life, regardless of where you work, what industry you're in. If you're trying to build a customer database, you're going to face duplicate records one way or the other. What the industry benchmark is in B2B marketing is when you look at the database, whether there's 10,000 people or 10 million people in it, the idea is you want to keep the number of duplicates below 1%. The challenge that we see when we start working with some dealers is that's typically in the double digits, and it can be upwards of 40 to 50%, which is insane. One of the biggest culprits of duplicate records is kind of filling out the form on a lot of service schedulers. So service schedulers are a critical piece. They're not going away, but the challenge is people hate filling out forms now. They take the path of least resistance, and a lot of times you'll just get an email address or a partial part of a name just to get that service appointment, but it creates another record in the DMS for that particular customer. So I'm not knocking those. I'm defining kind of a root cause to how sometimes these problems can start. But think about that. So regardless of how the duplicates got in there, when someone now decides that they're going to do marketing, whether it's internal or external, and then you create a marketing list and there are 4 records for that one person in there, and those 4 records get pulled into the system, and now they're in a holding room to start getting emailed out, or maybe they're in another holding room to get texted out or to go to the print shop to send out direct mail. there's a chance that all 4 of those records are going to fall into that campaign. And this is where the bad customer experience begins. The second big challenge that we see are the malformed records. And this is a close, they're very similar to duplicates, but basically a malformed record's defined as data that can't be read or read correctly. So the easiest examples are, there's a record that's missing key pieces of information or it's partial information. So I used to live in Charlestown, Massachusetts. So there could be, Charlestown, MA, Charlestown, Mass, Charlestown, Massachusetts. And depending on how subsequent systems are pulling information, that's where the malformation of these records can cause problems, because what happens is that information is pulled in, it's presented often incorrectly, and then it's introduced incorrectly into a campaign. And this happens all the time. And then the third area is the invalid email addresses. And this one is, pay attention to this one because this one's scary, is, invalid email addresses and spam traps are similar, and we kind of talk about them interchangeably. But if invalid emails are criminals that deserve to go to jail, right? Spam traps are also criminals that are going to like a maximum security prison. They're the worst. And so how do invalid email addresses find their way into a database and infiltrate themselves into these duplicate records and these malformed records, as well as records that otherwise would be perfectly fine? Is sometimes it's just an honest mistake where someone just fat fingered in the wrong email address. The other time is people are bypassing force fields in the system. So maybe it's a salesperson trying to skip some steps to get a customer into the system, or it's somebody in the service department that, blah, blah, blah at noemail.com, right? And then the other invalid email addresses, I have, for me personally, I have a Yahoo email address that I opened up shortly after I graduated from college in 1998. That's probably still out there. I don't even know how to log into it, but that email address is could be considered an invalid email address. So to give you to quantify this, about a year ago, we looked at 8 million customer records across about 250 or 300 customers of ours. And of those 8 million contact records in there, there was over 250,000 invalid email addresses in there. And of that 250,000 invalid email addresses, a little over 40,000 of those were spam traps. So that's essentially just every single time something was being sent out previous to us getting our hands and getting a handle on that. That's like playing Russian roulette every single time you're trying to send out email. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. So there's a lot of bad data, but it's helpful, again, to just organize it into duplicate, malformed, and invalid email addresses, and then having a plan on how do you identify those, and then how do you permanently fix them. And so that's how we that's how the very first thing that we do when we start working with the new client. So think about it as, garbage in, garbage out, bad information in, bad information out are, well-known, they're cliches, but they make sense because they're true, right? So not only does it compromise the customer experience, but when you think about, I'm now getting a bad customer experience because I'm getting marketed to multiple times, that also has massive downward pressure, which is something that is not talked about a lot on the reporting, right? So if there's not a data strategy on the information coming in, you should question all the reporting that's coming out, because the reporting is basically reporting on partial records, which means you're only getting a partial report on what's working and what's not working. And I think that's just, for some vendors, that's a dirty little secret that people don't want to talk about. So let's think about, there's kind of some broad categories of consequences when this isn't handled or handled correctly. So talked about a minute ago about how as we're a vendor in the space, right, we don't control the data that we're leveraging on behalf of the dealer. So the analogy that I like to use is it's sort of like the refrigerator in an office break room, right? So everybody has access to that refrigerator. Some people are responsible and respectful, others not so much. However, everybody has to share and use that same refrigerator. It's kind of the same thing with the dealer's DMS database. Someone's nice Tupperware with yesterday's leftovers is sitting next to someone else's, 5-week-old Chinese food that's sitting there open in the refrigerator, stinking the whole thing up. So those create some problems, as you can imagine. So when upwards of 40% of a database can be covered in duplicate records, that means you could potentially be emailing that same person over and over again, assuming you even have the right email address. The message, whether it's relevant or not, is compromised out of the gate. And there's a debt that has to be paid for not doing this right for so many years. So if you've not addressed the duplicates, or the vendor that you're working with doesn't have a clear plan to address the duplicates in an automated way, and if you don't have a handle on identifying and addressing the malformed records, and certainly if you can't identify and remove permanently those invalid email addresses, you are losing customers, period. You're just wasting money because of bad data quality. You could be sending too many things out, and you could be, it's kind of like the new obsolescence, if you will, of outbound marketing. There's the reputation and the lost customers it's kind of hard to calculate that, but that's certainly happening behind the scenes. And think about it, when a customer blocks you, you cannot repair that relationship. When an ISP like Google or Yahoo or Microsoft Mail blocks you, your message cannot be delivered at all to anybody who has a Gmail address. So it's prevalent across here, and a lot of people don't even know it. So the second consequence, is kind of this debt to be paid. And, it's a little bit, I like to liken this to the Titanic analogy, right? So it wasn't the ice and the iceberg kind of above the water that everyone could see that sunk the ship. It was the big mass below that nobody saw that pierced the hull, which is ultimately what sank the Titanic. And it's kind of the same idea with the damage that's caused with data that's happening below the surface. Like, everyone knows, man, I probably have some challenges with my data. Man, I'm creating some bad customer experiences. But I can promise you, if you're not proactively doing something about it, it's a lot worse than you realize. So we kind of take a step back. The goal of marketing, right, in general, marketing 101, is to let somebody know that you know them and to try to get them to trust you. And then they will share something with you, and then you react positively to that, right? And so the more you share, the more you know, or the more they share, the more you know about them, and then the smarter your subsequent marketing can be. This is why funnel marketing and content marketing work, and this is why they're so important. We're heading into the holiday season, right? So we'll probably all inevitably go to some type of a holiday party, maybe for a spouse, maybe in the neighborhood, it doesn't matter, right? Probably all of us will go to some type of a holiday party over the next 3 to 4 weeks, right? And so we'll be in a situation where we're meeting new people, or we're seeing someone maybe we only see once a year, and first impressions happen, and they happen quickly. And, was that person interesting, right? Were they actually engaged in listening to what I was saying? Were they asking me questions, or were they spitting on me and looking over my shoulder because they think that there's somebody more interesting to talk to, right? But when we find somebody and we find something in common and someone who's genuinely interested, we start to build a relationship with that person, or we start to gravitate towards him or her. It's the same logic when it comes to marketing. So the negative side of that is if we demonstrate to someone that we don't understand them because we're sending them too many emails after they told us to stop, we're sending them a direct mail piece, or we're sending them email in a car that they haven't owned for 5 years, right? When we get their name wrong, right? Or there's a blank space in the ROM because the data is malformed, and we ingested that into the marketing campaign. if we hammer them with offers when they just made a financial transaction, they just got an oil change, and now we're telling them a great deal for an oil change coupon, that not only embarrasses your brand and the dealership, but those people are going to gravitate away from working with you. So poor customer experience is translation for we don't know you and we don't care. The irrelevant outreach is not mutually exclusive. It's asking a customer to basically block you. And this one can inflict real damage. And then just the missed connections because of bad information, that can go in multiple bad directions. So it's a great way to through COVID, where a lot of dealers had to downsize their sales teams, and now we're hiring a lot of people. So there could be new salespeople getting databases that they've never called into before, and if they start calling down lists and it's all bad information, that's a surefire way to make sure that people stop calling those lists, right? And then it's a great way to let an ISP like Google or Microsoft or Yahoo let them know that you're not following best marketing practices. So now we'll talk a little bit about the complexity, and then define a CDP, and then and then kind of just wrap this up with just some emerging trends. So what we've learned over the past bit as we've started to stand this up ourselves is the grunt work to getting your arms wrapped around the data is necessary, and it's hard. But once it's figured out and you can automate it, then you can start focusing on the task at hand, which is to sell and service cars. But it can't be done manually. It can't be done with old tech. And it really requires up-to-date art and up-to-date science and tactics. So making adjustments needs to happen, and it has to happen quickly. We learned a valuable lesson ourselves, which is why we moved into the direction that we did. We initially kind of built everything ourselves. We were making really good progress. And then when the inventory crisis came, the requirements that we needed to adjust our marketing, it was just going to take too long. And we made the decision at that point that we wanted to stay on the same strategic path, but we wanted to outsource where and how we were actually building the technology, because we understood that speed wins. So if I were just to summarize the complexity here, is silos have always existed within the DMS and the CRMs, but the challenge is magnified now because of just the growing list of all of these new first and third party data that people want to start leveraging, or there's just a lot of new cool companies out there when it comes to conversation, conversion type tools out there, when it comes to AI and powered chat systems. When it comes to there's really neat stuff coming out with all the telephony and the phone tracking companies. And so this is a blessing, but it's also making things more complex and harder. So if you're not able to identify, address, and automate these duplicate and malformed records and the invalid email addresses, all of this other work that you're trying to do just almost becomes irrelevant. This is one of the reasons, outside of automotive, the CDP space has really been exploding over the last few years, right? There's been billions of dollars in investments in this space because everybody is running into these same challenges. Just a litany and all this new first party data out there that everybody wants to be able to leverage to do a better job of marketing. But if you don't have the right technology to accept that information and do something with it, it's dead on arrival. So under the theme of kind of modern tech, let me just call out 2 points. So one, the primary reason that a customer data platform makes sense for retail automotive is the same reason that it makes sense for most major retailers, Nike, Reebok, New Balance, right? E-commerce, anyone that's selling business on e-commerce, right? Pharmaceutical companies, consumer electronic companies like Apple or Samsung, that they have made massive investments in their own CRM and marketing systems and ERP systems. They're also investing heavily in CDPs to basically unlock all of that potential. And the second thing to call out is, forget about the world that we're going to be heading towards with open APIs and hopefully, there's going to be fewer as opposed to more crippling integration fees and charges that, bring some vendors to their knees. Most marketing solutions that are available today just aren't equipped yet to be able to do much with all of this data that could come hurtling at them soon. So think of it this way, right? It's all part of an evolution, and things just have to innovate and just evolve over time. So just like a newspaper ad from 1999 is different than a VDP, right? Just like an email blast is not a multi-touch campaign, right? And just like a multi-touch linear campaign to a particular audience is not the same thing as a marketing journey that's managed with true marketing automation software with capabilities that are designed to offer real-time, targeted, data-driven campaigns, right? These are customer experiences that are enhanced with efficiency and productivity, right? That enhancements and productivity is the end game here. So when we think about what is a CDP, it's CDP functionality will vary, right? Every customer is going to have the things that make them unique, right? The certain features and functionality. Just like there's a number of successful CRM companies in our space, just like there's a number of successful telephony companies in our space, there will ultimately be, a handful of leading CDP companies that will stand out. But we see the market, when we agree with a lot of things that are being written out there, kind of shaping up in three areas, right? There's really strong middleware. They brand themselves as we're middleware CDP companies that perform like the CDPs that Nike or Apple or Samsung would use, right? Where they assume that the customer, in this case, the dealer, right, kind of owns the marketing fulfillment, probably owns a little bit of the data management. And if a dealership's set up like that, that's a great solution. But we find that's typically not the case. On the other side of the equation, there's other companies that have kind of repackaged some previous technology and kind of rebranding it or making some changes to it to call themselves a CDP, or there's a CDXP, or just different acronyms that happens, right? And the dust will settle, but it is causing some confusion out in the market. And then there's a third group, and we belong to that third group, which is a hybrid CDP, right? So it's really offering both the customer data platform and the strategies, as well as the marketing fulfillment. And just like what's unique about automotive is most of the vendors that are prominent in this space are very specific to automotive. And there's a lot of good and bad reasons for that, but that's just the world that we live in. And that's why we built our platform specifically just for automotive and nothing else. So when we kind of quantify the value of a CDP, right, everything needs to have a return on investment, is regardless, a CDP, as it's defined by leaders outside of automotive, Treasure Data, Klaviyo, Telium, Salesforce, Oracle, Adobe, right, all have CDP, enterprise level solutions. They all have standard features and functionality that should exist in our world as well, right? The ability to ingest data from multiple sources, the ability to have identity resolution and automate the data management strategies. Number 3 is the integration to support fulfillment across all channels, and then AI-driven or supported workflows in segmentation. If there's a lot of people behind the scenes moving levers and stuff, that's not scalable, that's not sustainable. And so the purpose, kind of quantifying the value of this, the purpose of a CDP in retail automotive is to deploy and improve marketing through the customer experience, right? It collects and organizes first and third party data from a multitude of sources, and then it builds some more and builds some more on creating a primary marketing record, right? So there might be 10 records for Bobby Gaudreau. How do we identify the best one to market to, and then build everything around and report everything around that single cohesive view of each customer? And so when that complete view of the customer exists and then is shared with marketing tools, that's where the magic starts to happen, and it starts to deliver a highly relevant message or a series of messages over the quote unquote journey. And the result is the dealership will better understand customers to engage better, sell more, and retain more. So kind of just taking this home here is just the emerging trends is, and I hit on this early, so just don't take my word for it, right? This space is booming. So if you look at research from Forrester, Gartner, the CDP Institute, marketing is not going to get easier. It's only going to get harder, right? As the regulatory environment around customer data continues to evolve, a CDP is a great tool to be able to flex alongside of this, right? As you know, every state has its own interpretation on kind of utilizing customer data. A CDP platform has the potential to really drive more transparency and options on kind of recording, consent, monitoring data uses, and kind of anonymizing various insights. The second thing is an AI-friendly CDP can become a force multiplier. Kind of if you couple together the capabilities of true AI, right? That AI that actually is AI, with the high volume reach of a customer data platform, this will be able to provide insights and incremental results at scale. And it's just not feasible that a person can do this, or that kind of old technology that was really just designed to do email marketing or just run a simple calculation is going to be able to keep up. And then the third thing is as we're kind of quickly hurtling towards this cookieless world, it's important to make sure that the partner you're working with doesn't rely on an architecture and an engine that hinges, solely or predominantly on third-party cookies. And then just kind of the final point here is, over the last 3 years, this according to the CDP Institute, CDP companies, not publicly traded companies, kind of privately held, kind of institutionally backed companies, have received over $41 billion in funding from investors, private equity, et cetera. So this is a high growth market, right? And this category is doubling from a hiring standpoint. Forrester just came out with research that a company that uses a pre-built CDP that's customized to meet the demands in their particular segment can see an ROI of upwards of 350%. So I think just the statistics really emphasize that brands and marketing departments can kind of enter a whole new world of execution and fulfillment and ROI that doesn't exist otherwise, right? So kind of using this pre-built vendor expertise driven tech instead of kind of the old ways or trying to rebuild things from the ground up. So final slide here is just, Activator, and I don't want to turn this into a sales pitch, right? But it's you draw a fine line here, is we were born out of almost 2 decades of equity mining and service retention marketing and review management. 3 years ago, we started to evolve the traditional transactional marketing and kind of started to experiment with multi-channel funnel marketing. And a little over a year and a half ago, we started down this path of rebuilding this in new technology. And so we came at this from a different perspective and a different starting point. So we had successful businesses that were built around, segmenting audiences. We started with outbound marketing and focused on fulfilling across traditional channels, and we're soon going to be entering into digital and web. But we started with kind of ensuring that the first thing that happens through our data management layer is before we do any type of marketing, before we start executing on any type of list, we're embracing and understanding the data challenges, fixing those, and then automating them so that they're in the rearview mirror. So that concludes my slides. And so covered a lot there, and I don't know how much time we have left for questions, but I'm happy to take any questions that come in.
All right, let's get to a couple questions. Bobby, thank you. As always, you leave us with a ton of nuggets that we can all take back to our dealerships and utilize. So thank you. In a few moments, we're going to begin the Q&A portion of our webinar. But before we do that, I'd just like to ask everyone to complete the survey I mentioned earlier. Audience members, we need your feedback. And as a special incentive to complete the survey, we're offering a $10 Amazon gift card to 25 randomly selected people who complete today's survey. The survey should be appearing in the middle of your screen shortly. If you don't see it, you can launch it by going back to that black toolbar on the left side of your screen and just clicking on survey. Okay, let's get to the good stuff. Let's get to some of these questions we have. How should I think about cleaning up my data that comes from my CRM or my DMS?
No, I think good question. And I kind of just piggybacking kind of what I had said before it starts with really quantifying and understanding what needs to get cleaned up, right? And so it can be overwhelming at first, and that's why the recipe that we've kind of perfected is we can go in and looking at first what are the duplicate records, and then having a system to clean that up, identifying the malformed records and using some tools to be able to make them not malformed. And then equally as important, being able to identify and permanently remove the invalid email addresses. And it's not the average dealership database size, right? If there's 40 or 50,000 people in there, it's impossible that someone's going to go in there and do that. So for us, we've been able to leverage tools through our relationship with Salesforce. So we use demand tools to help out with malformed records. And then we use a company called @Data, which its sole purpose is to identify invalid email addresses and the spam traps before they get ingested into marketing campaigns. And if before these tools, it was very difficult to manage that. So there's a lot that keeps me up in the middle of the night, but worrying about that now is not one of them with those tools.
Good stuff. Is there a way to measure how good or bad my database is?
So yeah, I mean, again, we will do this ourselves, right? When we're talking to a prospective customer, is if we get a sample size from a dealer of their database, and then we can kind of plug that into those tools that I mentioned before. And then we can get a statistically significant percentage to say, we think that your database probably has X% duplicate records. You probably have this, or you have this many invalid email addresses as a percentage of the sample size that we have. So without using those tools, I don't know how you do that, but we've made it pretty easy, and that's something that we've gotten pretty good at over the last year or so.
When it comes to marketing, how do you decide between using traditional channels like email versus targeting people online?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the idea is, you have to meet customers where they are, and people want to buy and research on their own terms. And, it's disingenuous to suggest that you can have this Shangri-La world out of day one. But the ultimate goal is you want to be on all the channels and appropriately on those channels. And when you think about it as a funnel, or you think about it as a journey, certain customers use different areas. Maybe they start on a website and then they're requesting information. So, I think the key thing, what I would encourage people is you want to ideally, unless you have all these capabilities in-house, is find a vendor who has the ability to, that has it internally or can plug into all these different fulfillment channels. But at the same time, it's not enough to just say, I'm sending email, or I'm putting this on a Facebook page, or I'm targeting somebody on Google. It's being able to understand the behaviors and take that information back and do something with it, right? Whether I'm creating a better picture of Susan, or I'm reacting in real time to now, engage you differently in real time based on something you did or didn't do.
Makes perfect sense. Let's squeeze in a couple more questions before we have to wrap. What is the difference between implementing a CDP and a CDP plus journey builder, or a hybrid CDP? I think that's what they said. I think that's what you called it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, the hybrid CDP is, we didn't come up with that name. There was, there was an industry report that was written, I think like last summer or last spring, and they coined the hybrid CDP, and it makes a lot of sense. And, in the world outside of automotive, I use New Balance as an example. I used to live in Boston, and most of the shoe companies are there, but I happened to work near New Balance at one point in my career. A company like New Balance, they probably have, made significant investments in their marketing automation tool. I don't know who they use, but I bet they probably use, like a HubSpot or a Marketing Cloud or a Pardot from Salesforce, right? They probably have a significant investment in their own customer relationship management databases. They probably have teams of people who manage their lists and manage all their social sites, but they probably also have invested a CDP, because all those other investments weren't necessarily designed to interpret all of that behavior. And that's not negative. That's just certain things are designed to do certain things, and they're not doing other things. A CDP its whole point is to ingest first-party data, unify it, and then turn that back over to marketing systems. And so the reason that I think hybrid CDPs and the fulfillment are kind of becoming popular, and I think will probably be very de facto in our space, is because historically the dealers have always looked to third-party vendors to do a lot of the marketing, or they've made significant investments internally with marketing departments. And so having that technology that combines it together, I think is important. So the CDP means something. It's defined. The hybrid CDP simply means the marketing fulfillment and the CDP are part of one platform. And the good news is dealers have lots of options to consider.
They sure do. They sure do. Okay, what first steps should I take to ID a CDP that is right for my dealership?
Okay, so I know we're running on time, so I could spend an hour answering that question, right? So I think that the other, I think, assuming you need a system, right? The first thing from my perspective is a system that has a solution that can address and fix the data. Because again, I'm just coming back to, we as a company do our own marketing. We spend a lot of money on our own marketing technology. We use HubSpot to do it, right? We don't rely on HubSpot to clean our data. We're responsible for it. The way that we've just all done this is the dealers have always left that up to the vendors that are executing on their marketing. So there has to be a system in there. We refer to it as a data management layer. That has to be there, because everything else that happens is going to be muted, or it's going to be compromised without that data system. So it's forget about the grunt work. That's got to be automated in the system. And making sure that you're not marketing to people who no longer own cars, stopping the poor customer experience, and then making sure that you are not sending out too much information to people after they've either behaved a certain way or they've asked you to stop marketing altogether.
Perfect. Okay, that is going to wrap our Q&A session today. If you submitted a question and we did not get to it, Bobby will address it offline. I'd like to remind our audience that a recording of this webinar will be available on the Auto Success website, and you'll also get an email tomorrow. Feel free to log in to view it again, or encourage your colleagues to view it. Tomorrow you're going to receive that email. Just be on the lookout. Bobby, thank you. That concludes our webinar today. Everyone have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you so much.